Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. That's Logan Paulson. I am Craig Hoffman. If you haven't already, subscribe to our podcast. We'd love for you to do so, not just for us, but for your own benefit. Don't miss a pod. You can do that on your favorite podcast platform, including on YouTube, where full episodes are on 106.7 The Fans page. And if you are watching on 106.7 The Fans page, go ahead and hit that like button so that people know, well, that you liked it, or at least that someone did. They don't know that it's you. It's anonymous. Just go ahead and hit it. And then other people will get to see it because YouTube's algorithm will be like, hey, good stuff there. All right. Very interesting week for Russell Wilson last week. First week as Sean Payton's quarterback. What did you make of what they did schematically? Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator there, a guy that you've watched quite a bit of tape on before. Yeah. So how does what Payton and Lombardi want to do fit with what Russell Wilson can do at this point in his career and what was ultimately a 16-point performance in their debut?
Yeah, I ultimately got the sense that they were like, we don't want Russ. We don't like that. Everyone's like, we want Russ to cook.
Yeah, let Russ cook. Do not let Russ cook. Do not let Russ near the stove. No grilling for Russell.
That's right. He's doing like they do not want him leveraged at all. He lots of kind of roll passes, lots of play action, lots of run game, lots of quick game. And this is kind of this was his plan. This was his model to kind of correct Jameis Winston when he was coordinating for Jameis Winston. And it worked really well. Like Jameis Winston's touchdown interception ratio went from the worst in the NFL to like pretty serviceable, like just in one 5-game stretch with Sean Payton. And so this philosophy does work for him, especially for a team like last year that was pretty bad. Like they're going to lean on the defense. They're going to play a field position game, and they're going to rely on Russ to make plays in kind of specific situations. So despite kind of saying, Russ, you will never cook, he did make some plays in the red zone that I thought were really, really good, right? So Max Crosby, probably top 3 edge rusher in the NFL at this point. He is outstanding.
He is ridiculous, man.
He's going against Mike McGlinchey, beats him inside, and Russ just kind of sidesteps, soft roll to the right, finds somebody, touchdown. Next time they're in the red zone on the other side of the field, I think it's the fourth quarter, same thing. Crosby tries to rush inside. Russ steps out of the pocket, finds somebody, touchdown. So he still does have some kind of mobility and ability to evade and extend plays. It's just when you watch him, it's definitely not to the same caliber that it was, 3 years ago when he was like really balling in Seattle, or 5 years ago, 10 years ago when he was like kind of at the peak of his powers. He's still. So I'll put it this way: compare him to Josh Dobbs, and it's not even close, right? So like this defense is going to be facing a very unique challenge. I do think the pacing of the game will feel very similar to what Arizona brought in, right? They didn't want Josh Dobbs making any kind of big throws or making any big mistakes. I think it's the same thing with Russell Wilson, but you do have a better playmaking piece back there. And I think this offense does a really good job of kind of body punch. And then all of a sudden you're kind of like lulled into this false sense of security, and they take a shot. So for example, they were around the 40-yard line, which is a good time to take a shot if you're an offense. They take it's a play action pass. Cortland Sutton, who's like their only healthy receiver at the moment, beats the corner, is wide open, and Russ just overthrows it. So like they do have this, explosive playmaker. We'll see if Jerry Jeudy plays we're recording this on Thursday, so who knows. But Greg Dulcich, who was another guy who was very explosive for that offense, has a hamstring. He's out. Like they don't have a lot of explosive pieces, but I think Cortland Sutton is probably definitely a top 20 receiver in the NFL, maybe top 15. And like he can make plays for you if you have to. Big, long strider, but like that is still a feature of what they want to do. They're going to kind of bore you to death, and then all of a sudden they get one or two, and then all of a sudden it's 21 to 14 or whatever, and you're looking up at a different score than it was against the Las Vegas Raiders. So they don't want Russ cooking. They're trying to manage him as much as they can, but he still has the ability to make plays, and I think that's something that this defense needs to be acutely aware of. Is like they're gonna run the ball at you. They're gonna do some misdirection stuff. It's gonna be his average depth of target, I think, was like 2.4 yards or something insane. It's like he barely passed the line of scrimmage. So like just to give you an idea of what's going on with them, but it's a different animal than Josh Dobbs, and Joe Lombardi, Sean Payton, They know how to find shots. So that's something I'd say just kind of be aware of if you're watching this game.
Yeah. The difference of Jerry Jeudy is pretty significant. So all of a sudden you have Jeudy and Sutton, and you're like, oh, okay, well, this just became more difficult. And you talk about the ability to create shots. Like Jerry Jeudy just creates shots one-on-one because he's Jerry Jeudy. Like he's a tremendous route runner with great speed. We'll see what he can do from that speed standpoint with the hamstring injury. But he was limited in practice on Wednesday and told reporters that he is trending towards playing on Sunday. So that would obviously be a pretty dynamic game changer. But the other thing that I think I noticed about Wilson's performance against Vegas is it felt like nothing was on schedule. And so it is and that's kind of his MO. I almost felt like it was worse than usual.
Which is weird because that whole offense is based on being on rhythm and being on being on the quick game.
Russ's rhythm is like stand back there, feel like you're supposed to do something, and then run out of the pocket and find somebody's sidearm. And he's still good at that. And I just think there is a level of discipline and patience that this defense is going to have to play with that is very different than Josh Dobbs for sure. Or like when Josh Dobbs got out of the pocket, you're like, all right, really good time to see if we can make a play here because he's going to miss some safety or a linebacker coming from the backside, like, whatever it is, or, but we'll see. And this is where like a guy like Montez Sweat's skill set is so important because if you try to run away from Montez Sweat, you're not actually going to get away. And that's going to be interesting to see, Russell Wilson, when he breaks the pocket, does he intentionally run away from Montez Sweat? Like how does that other side work? Do you see a little bit more Casey Toohill, a little bit faster player this week, and especially in passing situations? There's like a lot of things there, but the patience and discipline element of this defense is going to have to be on its P's and Q's this weekend because your scramble rules, because all the kind of discipline-y stuff as plays get extended is going to become really important. And obviously on schedule is important as well. But Russ is a guy that looks to break the pocket. He looks to get out and make plays more than he does stand in there and try to find something late in the down.
Yeah, and you're right. Like that's what he wants to do, and this offense is not. It's not for him really. It was just such like you could just tell they were like, no, Russ, don't do that. Like let's like limit your creativity as much as possible. And again, like I kind of think that's warranted based on last year's performance from him. So I kind of understand what they're doing, but I also think there's a balance here. And I think they walked that really well with just Jameis Winston when he was in New Orleans. It was super conservative, but like the thing that makes Jameis Winston awesome is he's not afraid to take a shot. He's not afraid to be aggressive. And so they'd give him like 4 or 5 opportunities in a game where it was like, go be yourself. And he would do something crazy. He'd throw a pick or he'd throw a touchdown. It was like very, polarizing, but I think they need to adopt more of that with Russell, because again, there was times when he's escaping the pocket and the back's wide open in front of him and he just floats the ball over the dude's head. And it's like, that would have been a 15-yard gain. So obviously there are plays to be made for him. There are opportunities for the offense to be more efficient than it was against Las Vegas. But I think there's a lot of stuff going on with Russ, and it just really that offense is right now is trying to be Russ proof as opposed to supporting Russ in a way that you've seen other offenses do in the past. So,
yeah. The offensive line and pass protection.
Yes.
I don't know whether they're good or not because Max Crosby's so good. He makes everyone look bad.
Yeah.
But what did you see from the offensive line and pass pro? Then we should definitely talk about Denver's running game because I think they're going to run it a lot.
I think so too.
And they've got some really talented backs, obviously
100%.
starting with Javonte Williams. But to finish off kind of the pass portion of this, how is Denver's offensive line and pass pro?
Well, they went out and spent a lot of money this offseason to kind of improve that group. They've got Mike McGlinchey playing right tackle, who again was in San Francisco and is a very good player. Like I'm trying to think of where I'd rank him. He's probably a top 12 right tackle in the NFL. He's very good, and I think he did a really good job against Crosby. Like Crosby got him because Crosby gets everybody. But I thought like on those 2 touchdown plays I described, like to keep in phase with a guy who can kind of do whatever he wants and rush how he wants was really good job by him. They also signed Ben Powers from Baltimore. He was another huge free agent signing, like a $55 million guard, which is people aren't spending money like that on offensive linemen anymore. But he's known to be a better pass protector than a run blocker, big kind of 350, 360 pound kind of guy. And then they got Garrett Boyles, who again is, been a little bit up and down, but when he's up, he's a top 5 player at the position. Like he's in that same conversation with like Trent Williams, and he's not in that first tier of like Trent, Tristan Wirfs, like maybe Lane Johnson. He's a little bit below that, but he's always a very very kind of when he's on, and I thought he played really well. Quisenberry is the center. Is a guy that has kind of been a little bit of a journeyman, but has a reputation for being a solid player. And then, do you remember the guy from the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago? I don't remember his name. Let me look it up real quick. He always had his belly out, his big belly.
It feels like that's a lot of guys in the Senior Bowl.
True.
Talking about Quinn Manertz.
Yeah, Quinn Manertz.
Yeah,
he's kind of
Wisconsin Whitewater's finest.
Yeah, there we go. And he played the whole Senior Bowl with a broken hand, so good for him. So tough, kind of gritty guy, really good athlete. So I think that group's pretty good, and I think they're better than what we saw against Arizona. So I'm really, really excited to see what our defensive line does against this group. Because again, this is not the best offensive line in the NFL, but I think they're pretty darn good, and I think they're pretty effective. And I think they're pretty good in pass pro. And I thought, like, when you watch the game down to down, like, because, obviously Max Crosby's there, but there's also in Las Vegas, there's also the first round pick from Texas Tech who's there too.
Yeah, Tyree Wilson.
Tyree Wilson, who is a big, freaky looking dude. And he rushed a couple times against Boyles, and Boyles did a great job kind of understanding what he was trying to do and containing him. So I really do believe this group is significantly better than what we saw. And I want to know if this defensive line can be dominant against a group like this, because they're dominant against last week against a group they should have been dominant against, but this group is a little bit different. Even the tight ends, like Manhertz, the tight end, there is a blocking tight end. He was in I think he was in Carolina last year, or Jacksonville.
He's definitely played in Carolina. I don't know.
Yeah, he was originally in Carolina. I think he was in Jacksonville for a year, but he's like one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL. He's basically an extension of the O-line. Like, this is a very different kind of challenge. Like the Denver Broncos, they want to run the football. They want to be physical. They want to get after guys. And then in those passing situations, because of that kind of quick game, because of the play action, it makes rushers less effective. But I also think they're a very talented group. So in terms of matchups, like, circle that one, because that's a big one. Because, like, the defensive line basically took over the game last week. And can they do the same thing this week would be my question to the team and to them, is like, can you do it versus a group that I think is better?
Well, and how you rush against Russ is obviously super important, because
100%.
we talked about, he wants to get out of the pocket, and we talked about how good James Smith-Williams in particular is at setting that edge and keeping things in front of him, and then setting up, Allen and Payne and Sweat to be able to eat, just kind of push his guy towards those three monsters and see what you can get. And the way Sweat rushes is very disciplined, but also highly effective, has a sack and a half last week. So I think keeping those edges and making sure that Russ doesn't have the windows to escape in the first place, especially, and just like make Russ beat you on time. And if he does within the timing of the offense, like, congratulations, man. Sean Payton's going to be thrilled. But making sure that he doesn't get out and do the Russ stuff, I think is really important. And obviously the back end will help with that, because he just doesn't see very well down the field. Like,
it seems that way. And
small guy who's trouble seeing over the offensive line. He's had ways in his career of creating throwing windows, but he loves to get out and be off schedule. And, the more you can keep him in, the less he can see. He's just staring at the back of helmets.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that the 2 touchdowns are when he breaks the pocket, in the red zone. So, like, can you be disciplined in those situations? And again, like, to your point, like, it's going to be a huge feature of the game is containing him in the pocket and just manage, because I don't think he's the same playmaker that he was, but he still can hurt you. And I really want to drive that point home. Like, he is a much better quarterback than Josh Dobbs. This offense is much better than Arizona's offense. This defense is much better than Arizona's defense. This is a totally different animal. So can this team, the Commanders, learn from the mistakes they made, or learn from Arizona, and kind of match the intensity of this first road trip against a team that I think their record might not be great, but they're a good football team. They're a good football team. So I'm really this is going to be a very interesting test for this group.
Russ completed basically 80% of his passes last week. So, like, they didn't go anywhere, but he's
that's the intent of the offense.
Stuff.
That's the intent, right? Is like, find short stuff that you get the ball to your hand quick, and where he doesn't have to, like, he's not throwing interceptions or taking sacks or taking negative plays, because this is a comprehensive team offense. And what I mean by that is, like, You're not calling the game as an offensive coordinator only. You're calling it in conjunction with your defense, understanding that your defense is going to hold this team to 17 points or whatever, And I think it's perfectly reasonable after watching them play week 1. Like that is a very talented group. So it's not just me scoring as many points as I can. It's me understanding we've got a really good defense. Let's use that as a tool so that we're not over leveraging ourselves offensively.
Yeah, definitely.